everybody. My name is Eric Ramirez. I'm part of Harvard Alumni for Education. We're going to start in 5 minutes. We are just waiting for more people to join. But as soon as we have like 7:05, we will start. Thank you. Welcome to be here. Well, as you might know, we have three co-directors for Latin America. The co-directors are Gustavo Rojas, who is here. Gustavo, if you want to introduce yourself, will be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very nice to have you all this evening. I'm joining from Mexico, as I said, although it's very hard to realize when using English as a language, but I'm originally from Chile. So if I was speaking Spanish, you would probably realize that I'm not Mexican. But I've been living here for the past 12 years, working on exciting projects such as Teach for Mexico, where I met Eric and other fantastic initiatives around the education landscape. And as of now, as of this year, I'm starting a leadership development consultancy firm named Aquí se aprende liderazgo, and it's fantastic to have you all on board, especially Ben and Will. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Gustavo. And also we have part of co-directors is Patty Vasquez. She right now is in a meeting with her board. She's trying to escape from the board, but I don't think that she can do it in that way. If she has the time, she's going to join, but she will be those later on. But also we have some of the coordinators. One of them that is going to join us to help us co-moderate this session is Peter. Peter, if you want to introduce yourself, will be fantastic.
Thank you, Eric. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Peter Swing, based out in San Jose, Costa Rica. Met wonderful people in the Hugsy community. Some were my classmates and partner in statistics, cough, cough, Gustavo Rojas. Trying to run a couple of education, initiatives out here. One is Enseña por Costa Rica, which we had to, put on a hiatus and maybe even talk and discuss about that as we move on through the presentation. And just really excited about education spaces, and looking forward to this wonderful discussion.
Thank you. Other members that we have in the team is Ivana, Maria, Ingrid, and also Camila. Camila just joined our coordinators in Latin America. Camila, if you are around, can you introduce yourself? It will be fantastic.
Olá, hi everyone, good evening. I'm Camila from Curitiba, South Brazil. I am Harvard alumni because I did a postgraduate program and at Harvard Medical School, training to teaching medicine, class 21-22. Good to see you. Thank you.
And this is her first webinar as part of the team. So welcome on board, Camila. Congratulations.
Yes, my first webinar. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. In the next slide, we have a small introduction about the vision of Ben about creating Minerva University. He was launching Minerva University in 2011 when I was launching Teach for Mexico. In that way, for me, was looking into a lot of different projects that were doing different things in the world. Minerva was very excited to see. Why? Just because the principle of reinventing the entire higher education. Something, and we're going to speak about different things that Ben thought about when launching Minerva. It was to really try to do something totally different of the education system. Try to create a system that was more experiential, not just a way of lecturing and learning in the classroom, doing something totally different. And for the last 14, 15 years, it has grown, it has developed into not just a university, it has evolved into a system that now is in, I think that around 30 different organizations, institutions, academic organizations around the world. Some of them in Latin America, for example, I believe that they're working with Universidad Iberoamericana, CETIS Universidades in México, Universidad Peruana de Ciencias Aplicadas en Perú, y Universidad de las Américas in Ecuador. And we also have Will on the team today. He's joining us too. and he's in charge of strategic partnerships in Latin America. But something very interesting is that Will, he's from Tijuana. He speaks Spanish, but also he has worked in Latin America, in Africa, in Korea, in Japan. He has a lot of experience launching and supporting these kind of initiatives, trying to change the way that education is happening in the world. That the way, welcome Will, welcome Ben to this webinar.
Thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure.
Great to be here.
Fantastic. And we're going to start just with your vision, Ben. If you can help us to understand how do you thought about inventing Minerva University, and how are you thinking about this systemic change of education, which it has a lot of different components, and also you were trying to disrupt the system, and also you have to face like traditional assumptions on the education system. In that way, exactly what were you thinking when you were creating Minerva University? And also, since you created in 2011, if you can tell us how you have evolved with this vision to up today.
Sure.
Voilà.
Well, that's a long question. I'll try to give you the short answer because it maybe takes up all our time if I get into too much detail. But the short version is that if you take a step back and imagine what would you do if you actually wanted to learn something, to truly learn something, not to say that you've learned it, not to get a certificate that said you've learned it, but to actually learn it. So imagine you were to want to play a sport or play a musical instrument or learn a language. And I would come to you and I'd say, look, I've got a great idea. I'm going to spare no expense, right? I'm going to teach you how to play tennis. I'm going to hire you 4 separate coaches that'll be dedicated to teaching you tennis. Now, slight problem is that none of the 4 coaches know how to play tennis. They'll also refuse to talk to one another, so they'll have no idea what each coach is telling you to learn. And once you're with them for 4 months, I'm going to fire these 4 coaches and at random pick 4 other coaches who will also not know how to play tennis, have no idea what the other coaches are trying to tell you to do, and have no idea what the previous 4 coaches told you to do. And we're going to repeat that 8 times, and you're going to learn tennis by then, right? Now, that's insane. I mean, it sounds like somebody, came up with this on ayahuasca, but the reality is that that is our secondary and post-secondary education system. That is exactly what we do, except we're not trying to teach people to play a game. We're trying to teach people to be productive members of society, to be able to not only thrive and succeed in their own lives, but actually weigh in on decisions that govern not just their lives, but all of our lives. Right? We want them to participate in elections. We want them to be able to potentially serve. We want them to be able to be flexible so that they can change careers as careers change, so that they won't be dependent on us to support them through a welfare state. Right? And so stakes are vastly higher, yet our entire process of education is non-existent, basically. And we know it's non-existent because if I were to ask the folks here to think back about their undergraduate days and assume that this webinar was a big ruse, and what this webinar really is a re-administration of a final exam from your undergraduate days right now. I'm going to pop it up on the screen. You each have your 60 minutes, and you got to finish it. And I'm assuming I'm going to give you one that you got an A on as an undergraduate. Is there anybody here who would get above an F, assuming you're not a professor of the subject today? Right? I asked this question to tens of thousands of people across 30 countries. The only consistent answer I get is laughter. That the assumption that you could actually remember what it is that you were supposed to have tested correctly, supposed to have known undergraduate, is a laughable proposition. And we all know this, but think about a much more profound question, which is imagine that today I wasn't presenting you with a test, I was presenting you with every test, every assignment, every project. And today you could get an A on all of them. Whose life would be any different? I've never met a person that can answer that question. And that's the fundamental problem of our education system. We're engaged in a $2.3 trillion kabuki theater where we do all sorts of exaggerated things and motions and cram for tests and perform rituals and apply for college and celebrate and care about alma mater and add zero value. And the world can no longer afford that. The world has not been able to afford that for decades already. But today's world is completely incapable of dealing with that. And so Minerva was set up as an example of how you can work actually within the system rather than throwing a bomb and destroying the system and replacing it with something very different. How do you actually work within the confines of the system and actually bring an education that is not only one that is retainable, but that's coherent and consistent such that you can apply it, so that you can use it. 100% of Minerva alums, you would ask them, what if you could remember everything from college? How would you use it today? They tell you, I already remember what I learned in college and I use it every day. And that's what an education is supposed to be about.
Thank you, Ben. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, Ben, that's interesting, insight and knowing that Minerva is based in San Francisco and the Bay Area. That's wonderful. I'm an alum, a Cal alum for undergrad, and so maybe just a tad bit different, with me in terms of my experience in undergraduate. My question for you, Ben, is with so many changes in higher education landscape, not only with thinking about different ways that undergraduate will change, and also thinking about the context of AI, political movements, the ones that we're experiencing, exactly right now in this moment. What do you foresee the impact will be in the context of AI, new technology, political movements right now, maybe in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think much of the impact is already revealing itself. And what's interesting is that when I founded Minerva, it was 2010, and those were actually the two primary factors that I was thinking about. At the time, there was a craze in education around adaptive learning. And the assumption was that AI would teach everybody everything. And what is it that you would learn after then machine learning, now AI? The second was that we were in the United States 2 years after the selection of Sarah Palin as the vice presidential nominee for the Republican Party. And I will say many of my predictions do not come true, but I said that John McCain would pick her as his vice presidential nominee 6 months before he did. And I said that she, not he, is going to be what the Republican Party is going to look like in the future. And so all of the writing was on the wall back then. And Minerva was specifically built for a world where that was the reality. And we have to understand that there are two things that are true about that world. Thing number one is that the nature of the propaganda, the distortions, etc., which comes, by the way, on all sides of the political spectrum, so it's not reserved for one side or another, becomes more and more and more sophisticated and effective at delivering messages that tear people apart. And the second is that if you want to be able to either counter that or in general just be productive in a real world, you have to learn to somehow be able to add value to a super intelligence. These two things are at the heart of what is going to make our society viable. And right now, our society is not viable. And we are kind of marching along, assuming that everything is going fine. Oh, one day to the next, everything is good. But the reality is that the fundamental institutions in society are not starting to crack, they are breaking apart. And the collapse in public confidence in our institutions, the replacement of norms and those institutions by fundamentally ineffective and inefficient alternatives is portending a future that is going to be very, very challenging. So, what is the solution to something like that? First and foremost, if you want to understand how you add value to superintelligence, you in many ways solve the first bit, which is that you're able to understand and be able to discern what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what is of high quality versus low quality, what is probable, what is improbable, right? And you're able to look at a number of different probable appearing options and be able to discern which one of them is the basis of which off of which you want to build a decision or a solution. And to do that, you have to both master at an extraordinarily deep level the fundamentals and understand why it is that the fundamentals matter, and have higher order thinking that allows you to build off of first principles and fundamentals to ingest information and be able to discern and make decisions. Universities do neither of those things. Universities sit in the middle, which is here is a vomit of information, put that into your short-term memory and delete it. And that doesn't help anybody.
And Eric, I'm sorry if you don't mind me following up. And this is great, Ben. Thank you so much, and would love to hear from Will's perspective as well. But here in our context in Latin America and South America, we kind of look at Minerva University. We understand that for the past 4 years, you've been awarded the #1 most innovative university, right? And when I think about our context here in Costa Rica, very local, we are just, so far behind. I mean, not only because of our resources in, universities here in Costa Rica, but if we think about the Latin American and South American context, and giving a pass for Chile in terms of their advancement in technology, and other countries, not so far behind in terms of like Colombia, Mexico. But I think for the vast majority of us, we're stuck in this bubble where, we see the changes happen in, Europe and North America with, these types of universities. What is something that we can do? I mean, we're almost spectators looking at the technological advancements in higher education. And for educators like us who go back, to our roots in these areas of Central and South America, we're kind of, with the lack of resources, the political context is sometimes even more demanding for us, more limited. What would you suggest, for education leaders in our context? What could we do with the limited amount of resources and political power that we might have in our host countries? What is something that we can do to at least make strides forward to at least be on board this ship that is moving light speed?
Will, do you want to start and I'll add on to it?
Sure. And thank you, Peter, for that great question. In Latin America, the urgency is even greater because young people are hungry for opportunity, but they are often constrained by these old structures. that that doesn't allow them to move forward. True transformation means changing the idea that knowledge transmission is good enough. So the first initial shift that needs to happen within institutions and within faculties and professors is that teaching students how to think, adapt, and lead is more important than teaching them memorization, basically, helping them memorize stuff that they're going to forget. So once institutions embrace this mindset, change becomes possible. But it's the first initial step that I think is essential for leaders of institutions and for faculty at institutions. Start changing that mindset is essential. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I think to add on to what Will was saying, when you look at what's happening in the United States and the adoption of technology, in some ways, Latin American institutions should be happy to see that happening. Because if you were to take the sum total of education technology leaders and companies in operation today, and you transport them back 15 years ago and tell them, you guys have to develop ride hailing and figure out, what is the way to really disrupt the taxi industry. What they would do is they would develop an app that would turn the flashlight on your phone so you can hail a taxi more easily. Because that's how the education technology people think. Take a product that everybody hates, that doesn't work at all, and do something with technology that does the exact same thing. Maybe incrementally better in that it delivers that terrible product to more people or is more accessible. The opportunity that universities actually have right now, and we're seeing it writ large in the giant murder suicide of universities in the United States right now. And I call it a murder suicide because there are certainly certain individual or individuals that are plunging the knife in. But that knife was already disemboweling universities in a large ritual suicide motion that universities have been doing for decades, which is making themselves absurdly irrelevant in society. And so it was a popular move to go and accelerate that disembowelment, right? And what universities abroad are doing, which is a colossal mistake, is looking at these massively ineffective institutions and saying, with a tiny fraction of the resources, with no history, no prestige, let's try and play that game and never catch up, which makes absolutely no sense. The opportunity that exists for emergent countries right now is to leapfrog, right? It is to take the entire system, ignore it, throw it in the garbage, and go back to first principles and understand, wait, I actually want to teach my citizens something. If I were to teach them the things that I know to teach, instruments, music, etc., what do I know I need to do? Oh, I need to have spaced deliberate practice, not 4 months of something where I rain upon you to learn all sports all at once and then forget it, but a component where I am practicing over and over and over and over again. And over time, I take that component and I recontextualize it, right? I play tennis on grass. I play tennis on clay. I play against somebody who has a great backhand, a great forehand. I play against somebody who has a very subtle serve, a very fast serve. I play in windy conditions. I play in still conditions, when it's sunny, when it's cloudy. And then after I get really good at that, change the rules. I move to pickleball. And I transfer some of the core techniques and move it to a different context. And I repeat that over and over and over again, recontextualization after recontextualization. That doesn't look like a current educational system, but it's vastly, vastly more effective. And so if you were to think about creating institutions or creating curricula, pedagogical methodologies, assessment methodologies that do that, sure, it's an investment. Sure, you need to build new structures, but what you don't need is to find professors to pay millions of dollars to with tens of millions of dollars in a research project to produce nothing, right? You have an opportunity to leapfrog the system and to focus what matters and take a much more constrained resource and produce vastly better results.
Ben, there is the conversation about progressive or traditional or conservative education goes back a long way, at least 100 years, at least 100 years. And some structures have survived over that period of time in ways that feel, I don't want to say hopelessness is the word, but your idea of going back to first principles as the main driver of change produced by higher education institutions, or even this idea of second, third order of consequences and not just mere reproduction of what the big sharks are doing, which is what you are advising for higher education institutions Latin America, that has to coexist with the fact that we still follow on the same categorization and accreditation social function that higher education, and not even higher education, but education institutions in general, offer to society. And I imagine that has created a lot of challenges for you, particularly under that, hey, we're going to disrupt the system, but from within the system and not just nuking it up and, creating some alternative out there. And I'm very curious to hear what those challenges have been, which I assume have to do with cultural features that might be transversal across regions in the world, but also some of them might actually be even very culturally rooted in different parts of the world as well, right? So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, and particularly Will, because you have focused most of your work in Minerva on Latin America, and that feels very relevant for today's conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I'll let Will weigh in on this, but from my perspective, really the biggest barriers that we have encountered are people pretending like there are barriers, right? So everywhere we've gone and dealt with accreditors in 12 different countries, right? In professional organization, professional accreditors, national accreditors, regional accreditors, you name it. And when we actually deal with them, there are no issues because they have their little checklist and we go and and fill those checklists and say, sure, we'll cover this content, we'll cover that content, but we're really doing the stuff underneath, which really matters. But when we talk to the people who are at the university that need to deal with the accreditors or the leadership of the university that have to deal with the faculty, oh my God, they'll never approve this. They're terrible people. They're so rigid. They won't do this. They won't do that. And it's frankly an excuse. Sure, is it extra work? Of course it's extra work. Do you have to bring people along a journey? Of course you have to bring people along a journey. Do you need to overcome doubts and questions? Of course you do. But when you have an empirically proven, demonstrable in the real world, dramatically better approach, better solution, who in their right mind is going to say no to it? Right? Who is the bureaucrat that says, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to continue to accredit universities where public confidence has collapsed, where outcomes are terrible, where they don't actually comply with the own standards that we issue, and here I take something that actually checks all the boxes we've always aspired universities to do, right? That has been proven and has established a brand for excellence all over the world, and we're going to say no to that?" I haven't seen that happen yet. Maybe it will. Maybe I'll be surprised. We're only in 12 countries. There are almost 200 of them. So, I imagine the North Korean accreditation authority would not be pleased with our approach. But outside of that, I haven't encountered a problem yet in reality. Is it more work? Yes. Is it a real barrier? That's not the barrier. The barrier is getting to that point. It's the conservatism and fear of leaders who are not leaderly, people who do not have the vision and the intestinal fortitude to bring their institutions from one place where they are, where they know they're not fulfilling what they're supposed to do, to a place where they can be, and the journey that that requires.
This is
Yes,
fantastic.
totally.
Go ahead, Will. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, in our conversations with many university leaders, um, they usually stop themselves when they start thinking about the change that will be needed with the faculty, for example. They say, oh, no, I will never be able to do that with my faculty. It's impossible. But then we have the example of several leaders in Latin America who are convinced that this change is needed. And once we start a collaboration and once faculty gets involved and understands the model and the why it is important to change, we see the change happen. And when everybody told us, you're crazy, you're insane, that's never going to happen, we see it happening. It's just something that it needs to happen, needs to be collaborative. We need to understand the partner, their challenges, their constraints, and then work together in helping them understand why this matters and the impact that it will have in the students. Ultimately, professors and teachers, what do they want to do? They want their students to be successful. So this model allows students to gain the tools to be successful, and that's why it's so powerful. And once they understand it, we see change happen. It's not impossible. It's a big barrier, but it's not an impossible barrier to surpass.
Thinking about this vision, Ben, Will, thinking about like the education system has to change in so many ways, and it's something that the teachers, the principals, the authority maybe might understand once they get it. Exactly how you will see that the university will have to change, how a high school will have to change on providing education. Right now, we have like 10 months, has to be the cycle of education, 1 hour each class. Like a subject, if you want to learn chemistry, you have to do 50 hours in certain grade. In that way, that's not the process that you are putting together. That's not the process that you are pushing. The process that you are pushing is more experiential learning, that the project, the learning through projects, doing something that is meaningful to the life of each one of the students. But in that way, the whole configuration of the education that we have every day has to change. In that way, how I know that you are working with 30 different organizations, education organizations around the world, but in certain parts, not all of them have taken the whole Minerva inside their classrooms, but certain parts. How I know that that's step by step, but exactly how do you see that really you can totally transfer an educational institution that has been very traditional to now think in about developing skills and not just acquiring or putting up knowledge?
Yeah, there are really three components that make a Minerva education. Component number one is a coherent and cohesive curriculum. A curriculum where when you are introduced to a particular cognitive tool or a concept or a particular habit that you want to develop in course number one, that it is interwoven throughout the rest of the curriculum, no matter how you navigate that curriculum. So a curriculum that is centrally designed, that is coordinated, and that has a skeleton, a scaffolding that goes throughout the entire curriculum that reintroduces and reinforces and recontextualizes those things that the institution determines that its graduates must be able to master and be able to deploy. So that's component number one. Component number two is a pedagogical methodology that ensures that students are actually retaining it. There's a statement that a lecture is the most efficient way of getting the notes of the professor to the notes of the student without passing through the brain of either. Right? And what you really need in education is exactly the opposite. It is the students struggling with the material, actively engaging in it, applying the tools that they had previously learned to the material they're encountering, and being able to understand how to apply those things in this new context and do that over and over and over again. So from a pedagogical perspective, we've developed not only the curricular approach, but the pedagogical as well, that you have enormous amounts of information in the research literature on the techniques that are effective at doing high retention, high understanding levels of understanding pedagogies. We're really the first ones that have ever compiled all of them together, taken every high effect size, high statistical significant, repeated research or replicable research and put it all together. And the effect size of doing them all at once is dramatic. So that's the second element, the pedagogical. The third is the assessment. And this is really something which I am particularly passionate about, but for whatever reason is almost never talked about in education circles. We think of assessments usually as a binary. Do you know, not know, right? Correct, incorrect, right? True, false. If we're really sophisticated, we say, how well do you know something? Right? Do you have A- knowledge or do you have B+ knowledge? No one knows what that means, by the way, but that's the way to make us sound fancy. But this is completely irrelevant, completely useless. And the way to illustrate that is, I am sure many of you sitting here are listening to me and saying, my God, when will this guy stop talking? He's so boring, right? It just goes on and on and on because you can recognize when somebody is delivering things in a boring way. Yet, interestingly enough, when you yourselves have to give a talk, a lot of people in the audience are going to listen to you and say, oh my God, how boring is this person? Right? Why is that? It's not because you're hypocrites. It's because you have a failure to transfer. You are able to critique, but you're not able to produce. That happens all the time. And so the ability to know something in context number one does not mean you can apply it in context number two, even if it's as simple as the same exact context, the same exact tool, except rather than hearing it, you're doing it. Right? But now imagine that rather than delivering an answer to a question, instead, you needed to be massively engaging when it came to presenting a visual data visualization. Totally different transfer, totally different context. Some of the same ideas, some of the same techniques underpin it. How do you bring that from one area to another? Do you even think that way? Generally, people do not. Incentives / assessments force you to do that. If you were told you're not getting your Harvard degree unless you are demonstrating that you can apply what it is that you've learned, not in a final exam of the same class, but the concepts have to show up in at least 20 other final exams, and you have to do that interwoven throughout your entire curriculum, guess what you would be spending your time doing? Just that. Right? So an incentive, an assessment system that assesses breadth of application as opposed to linear depth of knowledge, or not even depth of knowledge, but short-term recall of knowledge. That is the difference between an effective educational system and an ineffective educational system. And the bad news for most people is that doing these three things together is massively difficult. And that's why you need a technology to assist the institution to be able to do it. And if you don't have that technology, you can't really execute it. Will, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think you made it very clear. Thanks, Ben.
Eric, it seems we do have about 15 minutes to jump in to questions from our audience. Do you think it's okay if we start a little Q&A?
Yeah. We have a question from John.
Yeah, are you there, John?
John.
Maybe you would like to share your question out loud.
Yes, of course. Thank you for the opportunity, and it's a real honor to listen to Ben. I've been a fan for a while. Actually, read your book, and in your book, you mentioned that the university's true value is determined by the potential of its students. So I would love to know what was the key catalyst that led Minerva attract such high potential students in its initial cohort without prior reputation? Was it branding, word of mouth, maybe a lot of marketing? And also, at that stage, were you prioritizing having more students, growth, your credibility through accreditation, or profitability?
Yeah. Well, definitely not profitability because the university, which is a nonprofit to this day, is very, very, very far from making money because we broadly educate very economically challenged students from all over the world. So if you ever want to lose a lot of money, I've got a great way of doing that, which is you enter the scholarship business because there is no market that clears for scholarships. It's just it's a never-ending sink, but it does good work. So how did we attract and why? The reality is that most universities, in fact, universities in general, what they do, they pick students and they find the best possible students depending on the pecking order, and then they say, "Look how great we are! Look at what our alumni have done." Um, the problem is that they've added no value, right? And what they've done is they knew how to select, and then the rest is the reality. What we did was we set for ourselves a benchmark. We said we want to produce better outcomes than Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge, but we're not going to be able to skim the top quartile of those universities. Those students are not going to just show up to Minerva. And indeed, if you look at an incoming Minerva class, maybe 3, 4, 5% will have turned down one of those 6 institutions, right? The rest didn't get in. So how is it that we indeed were able to have better outcomes in Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge? It's because we didn't find these students, we made them, right? The delta in education was our ability to take students that are 5 times more socioeconomically diverse than an incoming Ivy League class, students that come from past educational backgrounds that are good, very good, but certainly not above top Ivy League average, and are able to produce these types of outcomes. Now, why did even these very good students turn down mostly that next tier of institutions to come to us? The first and foremost, the research was there behind us. And so we did catalyze a lot of students to think and go back down to their own first principles to what it is that an education will produce for them. And the reality is, as we made clear to our applicants and students, that the data is clear. Where you went to school has very little value add to your life once you normalize for everything else, your IQ, your socioeconomic background, your network, etc. Right? Those students that have been able to get into certain institutions, prestigious institutions, and Harvard has been running the study for 70 years, and have rejected those institutions and went to lower tier institutions have the same life outcomes. Zero difference. Right? Because inherently it is what they're capable of. And so with that data and with having a lot of social proof, we had some very prominent names associated with Minerva. We had a lot of resources to go and find the students. I say the scariest number I ever say to somebody who wants to start their own institution, I ask them, how much do you think we spent to find our pilot class, which, by the way, paid no tuition for all 4 years. So they got to go for free. That was the other enticement, right? No risk, pay for your housing after the first year. First year, our housing was free too. Um, so think about how much we had to pay to bring in that learner, and that's $100,000 per enrolled student. $100,000. That's a crazy amount of money. But that was what it took, right? So that is the approach that we had to take, and how much we had to spend to do it. Now, this is another reason why we work with people who want to start new universities, because when you have to, and that was just the student acquisition part. Forget the curriculum building, forget the technology building, everything else. But we allow universities and startup institutions and individuals, entrepreneurs, to use the Minerva brand, right? Because it costs a lot less than that. Where the university is still a charity, but it can't spend that kind of money, right? But it costs 2 orders of magnitude less to enroll a student today. And that ability is really a big advantage that our partners can leverage.
Thank you, Ben, for all of this. I want you, if you can go deep a little bit. You mentioned that you invested in the students, in the selection, in the process, in the whole creation of the curricula, the content, the platform. Something that when I was able to meet Minerva, I saw the platform, and the platform was the way to see everything and to understand everything behind, and I was very amazed. Could you speak about the platform, everything that it does? Something I was amazed, and I want to share my experience. But basically, you will see, you will the teacher will see who was participating, who was not participating. He will be able to push and to pull students that were not participating to try to ask them questions. Also, the professor, the teacher will have like a way to follow the planning of the class and not forgetting different points that they were putting. And also, the system will provide feedback if you provide the good lesson or not. It was amazing to see the platform working. I remember I saw the platform during COVID, and I was totally amazed. But I know that it has evolved dramatically. In that way, if you can present certain examples that you have about the platform, will be fantastic. I know that the platform is not Minerva, just Minerva is the whole system. But
Yeah.
can you put some examples out?
No, absolutely. So our digital learning environment is called Forum, and Forum is what enables these 3 components. So on the curricular side, it allows an institution to create a learning taxonomy that is then connected down to the lesson plan through every single course that's offered across the institution, and allows for that recontextualization and space deliberate practice associated with that learning journey. On the pedagogical side, it assists, it creates a super intelligence addition to the professor. So it enables the professor to be able to get students out into breakout groups and understand not only how each breakout group is progressing, but who in the breakout group is contributing more than everybody else, and be able to intervene accordingly. It is allowing the professor to see who has been called on, who's participated in class, etc., and engage them accordingly, and so forth and so on. And on the assessment side, it builds in to the platform multiple arrays of assessment, including the various dimensions of transfer to assess the breadth of application of the learner. And it has all sorts of other side benefits that we were not expecting. I'll tell you my favorite anecdote. The first 2 weeks that we ran Minerva with our pilot class, we had the former president of the American Psychological Association as one of our founding deans, and she did a ad hoc research project with the 3 other deans. There are 4 deans who were teaching the students directly. There were 25 students in 2 sections, and they met for class 8 times a week. So in the first 2 weeks, She asked every professor at the end of the class, so these are 16 sessions per week, so 32 sessions, to write down, just as soon as class was done, who was the best student in class? Like, who gave the best answers? Then what we do at Minerva is the professors go back and look at the video. At least back then, they looked at all the videos and graded everything the students said, gave an assessment on everything they said manually. And she looked at who were the highest score getters in class. Anybody care to guess what is the difference between the students that the professors thought were the best students in class and those who were the best students in class? I will tell you, there wasn't a single session, not one, where the first impression of the professor was correct. Anybody want to guess what the difference is? I'll tell you. 100% of those the professors thought were the best students in class were men. 100% of the best score getters were women. 100%. Kind of fascinating. So the form also removes that bias.
Thank you. And I don't know if anyone that is here has a question for Ben. We still have 3 minutes just to close. In that way, if you want to share a question, will be fantastic. Or I can ask people that is in the audience, what are their reactions with all of this? I want to ask Nora, like what is your reaction with all this information that we are listening? I know that you have a high school, an online high school in Mexico. In that way, what do you think about what you have heard today?
Yeah, Eric, thanks for asking. It's fascinating. I think something that, we think about a lot and kind of, echoes your comments, Ben and Will, is working within the system. We have a Revoe, and so there is this very organic push and pull between like systemic issues around teaching and learning and assessing, and wanting to create something very disruptive that really meets people where they are, meets young people where they are, and encourages them to dream big and work hard to achieve it, as cheesy or cliche as it may sound. So, I mean, I think it's fascinating. I think anytime as an educator you feel compelled to lean into that creative spirit and think outside the box, only good things are going to happen from that. And, I mean, I think your comments around the CAC, I really appreciate it. Like, it makes me feel better knowing that initial CAC was $100,000. I'm going to think about that when I feel bad sometimes. And yeah, fascinating about, the gender bias. My response was typical. Unfortunately, I'm not surprised by that, but yeah, I mean, I there's a lot to unpack, and you've left me with a lot of food for thought. So thank you so much for sharing.
I will mention, since you're in the high school business, Minerva now has both a high school curriculum and even a middle school teaser course to start that off. It's in the Minerva Baccalaureate. You can find out more about it on mbac.com, mbacc.com. And if there's anything that we can do to be helpful, I am reachable, Ben at Minerva Project. Will is W. Sánchez. He needs to be a little bit more obscure since he has too many fans out there. So feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to be helpful if we can.
That's fantastic. I will definitely take you up on that. Thank you.
Eric, we have Adrian in the audience. He's raising his hand.
Thank you.
Physically, Adrian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, I'm an old guy. I'm almost 50 years old. I'm a good friend of Eric. We met in Washington, D.C. a very long time ago. But I'm concerned in education in two subjects that I haven't seen in many of the universities where I've been. One is the impact of physical and electrical records. I mean, the assimilation is completely different. So we are working with digital natives, and they mental processes, their cognitive processes are different in many ways. That could be an advantage. So the approaches in terms of how to deal with technology and the digital right now, it's completely a blended state. I mean, there's no a separation. But at the same time, many of the physical processes like writing are still necessary. I mean, some practices and executions. And that's, for example, in the K to 12 level that I'm seeing this warring in terms of education. The second scenario that worries me more, and you mentioned it at the beginning of your talk, is superintelligence. I mean, when we are going to achieve this level of technology, we're not only to compete with other intelligent people, but also with other intelligences. That I say it in plural because we don't know what shapes, aspects are they going to take.
Yeah.
And I remember that I proposed something probably 20 years ago when I was studying with Eric. We don't need a central intelligence agency. We need a central creativity agency. Because heuristics is a different way to approach the human side of this new level of competition. So hopefully we can achieve that and not to be surpassed.
Yeah, I will say that we're now building our first creative arts program in Korea, and I will say that it looks nothing like a typical creative arts program. You want to do creativity the Minerva way, you're gonna do it right. So it's but I do think that it's very much necessary. It will look different than what people are used to.
Well, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Will, to be here with us. Thank you, Adrian. It was great to see you here. Not on everybody. We have finished our webinar today. It was amazing, and to have you, really thank you to have you, Ben. Thank you to really challenge you to think totally differently about education. I think that it was an amazing experience to be with you here today. And for everybody else, thank you for being here and joining us in this webinar. Remember that we have a webinar every month. Next month, Gustavo, we're going to have Octavio.
Yeah, we're going to have a very exciting webinar. It's going to be the last webinar of the year. We're going to be with Octavio Lizama, a fantastic school principal from Chile. And he's introducing a very fantastic resource to all of us. It's a book that very recently published, and it is a method to how can school leaders hold on to AI in a way that maximizes time, maximizes energy for what really matters in schools, which is getting children to learn. So that's going to be really exciting the first week of December, and we'll be sharing all the details in Harvard Alumni for Education website and social networks.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Will. Thank you, everybody. This was such a fascinating discussion. Amazing.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.